All right, so today, by the way, this is like the fourth time I've recorded this video. Had some audio and microphone issues. I believe it's working correctly now. Going to talk about the differences between borderline personality disorder and bipolar disorder. So weirdly, maybe coincidentally, bipolar, BPD, and borderline personality disorder, BPD. Uh, I don't think it was intended that way. They kind of have the same acronym, and they have a similar overlap of symptoms and behavior. When I say BPD, I'm always talking about borderline personality disorder. I never refer to bipolar as BPD. I just call it bipolar, and it's easy to see why people get it mixed up. But it's very, very common for people with borderline to be diagnosed with bipolar disorder. And so immediately they're put on medication because that's generally the preferred line of treatment for bipolar disorders, to put them on medication, especially if they're manic. Uh, Medication can be very, very effective. And if it's borderline, the medication just doesn't seem to make a difference. They don't notice a difference. It's like, how are the meds? I don't know. I can't even, yeah. They don't really seem to do anything. So that could be one indicator that it's borderline instead of bipolar. I've had a lot of people tell me to, I've had a lot of people online tell me, I haven't had a lot of people in person tell me that I should be careful about diagnosing borderlines. I've had people tell me that it's really rare. I've had people tell me that it's overdiagnosed. I actually think it's kind of underdiagnosed. At least in my local area. My local area seems to have a very high occurrence of these behaviors. I believe that my local area might have a high prevalence of borderline. And I have a theory on that. I'm going to refrain from expressing said theory because it's just a theory. But it has to do with culture. It has to do with our local culture here, and a certain unique cultural factor that we have here, more so than anywhere else. So, anyways, it's easy to see why people get it mixed up. They have a lot of overlap of behaviors. Similar behaviors would include like impulsivity, the bad decision making. You see bipolars and borderline, like just make impulsive, crazy decisions, high risk decisions. So we also see the roller coaster of mood. The DSM calls this instability of affect, specifically for borderline, is how it's referred to as. And it just means the mood is a roller coaster. This is true for bipolar, though it tends to be kind of a rapid cycling type of situation. And so with borderline, though, it's because it's a different situation. It's usually because of the result of trauma. Okay, and the personality is in fragments. I talk about this all the time. And one of the reasons why you see such a roller coaster in emotions with borderline is because it's like the different fragments of the personality are basically kind of seesawing back and forth and taking over. Similar to DID, or dissociative identity disorder. And at least that's my theory. That's my belief on it. And so they're different disorders, but they have a lot of similar behaviors that the reasons are different for those. Another thing that's similar is that people with bipolar can have short episodes of intense irritability or even anger, and it's usually gone as fast as it showed up. And it's not that bad, and often the people around them are like, whatever, right? Whereas with borderline, these episodes of irritability are more like blind rage, intense anger, long duration. And like when we say intense, man, screaming, yelling, swearing, name calling, hitting, throwing, just erupting, just going nuts. And so that's one of the distinctions that I make with borderline. Now, it is true that they have a lot of similar behaviors. So what I do is I look for things that tend to exist in borderline but not bipolar. For example, the what I call heroes and villains. where people are either heroes or the villains. And in the borderline culture, it's called splitting. People go from hero to villain. One small infraction, and that person's permanently in the doghouse. Uh, they're just a villain, or at least they never regain the ground that they previously had. And we don't really see that with bipolar. Frantic efforts to avoid abandonment is another one for borderline. And like the perceived abandonment just causes like this erratic, intense behaviors, and just this desperate need to avoid abandonment is another one. One of the easiest ones for me to spot borderline as opposed to bipolar is what is the condition of the friends and family group. Now, borderline personality disorder has a tendency to alienate people. Those with bipolar may have a lot of friends. They may have very close family relationships. And what I've generally found with bipolars is that their family really loves them. They just know that when they're having one of these episodes, it's just like, okay, take your meds, Whereas with borderline, it's like those who are committed to the person with borderline, they are like in a constant state of heightened anxiety. They're tiptoeing around there. All of them are walking on eggshells. The spouse, the kids, the immediate family, everybody's just walking on eggshells. And so it's like if you look at borderline and the family is just like in this heightened state of anxiety, that's, to me, it's like, well, this person's bipolar. Really? What's going on? What's the status of the family? Oh, they're all terrified of this person. Yeah. Sounds like a personality disorder to me. And then usually I'll go from there. Like, is there also this? Is there also that? Is there also this? And most of the time, we just don't see that. We just don't see this type of dynamic in the social groups and the support systems with bipolar disorder. Those are some of the main ones that kind of go down that road. But again, if medication fails, could be borderline. But again, it's super easy to see why those two get mixed up. If you know someone, or maybe you are that. Oh, one more thing that I often see with borderline too that I don't see with bipolar is intense codependency. People with borderline tend to get into relationships with people with some fairly intense, unresolved codependency issues. There's just someone in there that it just enables the crap out of them. Makes all the phone calls with them. Borderline sneezes and the other person goes, excuse me. Is always saving them, always making excuses for them, always, picking up the pieces for them. We just don't see that with bipolar disorder. It's just not a thing. Bipolar disorder, by the way, it's not uncommon to see like fairly significant. It's not always there, but one thing that I look at that can mean that it's not borderline is fairly intense substance abuse addictions. People with bipolar can get hooked on things like here's what I see and here's what I really see in bipolar versus borderline. Bipolars have a tendency to get attached to things and do them super intensely, whereas borderlines never connect to anything. Those with bipolar disorder, like they might gamble and they just gamble. I know one person who's bipolar, and it's exercise, it's working out, it's bodybuilding, and it's go. It's just endless. It's just competitions and super intense, which is obviously better than something like gambling. But they tend to get really latched on to certain things. That is not what we see with borderline. Borderlines, in effect, are the opposite. They struggle to find anything like that. So there you have it. Some of the ways that I look for the differences between borderline and bipolar. So hopefully my audio issues are fixed. Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, share, all that good stuff. You know what to do. See you next time.